Mark Auslander. I teach in the anthropology department and cultural production program. This is a small, sort of modest beginning of our two-day symposium, hitting close to home. Human art and human rights from slavery to Guantanamo. It is, as our out-of-town guests know, a particularly interesting time to be talking about the relationship between art and social justice. The university is consumed, of course, with a struggle over our own Rhodes Art Museum. And we're spending a lot of time thinking about the relationship, the position of art as struggles for human liberation. It is also timely, we believe, that perhaps this afternoon, Eric Holder will be confirmed as the new Attorney General, perhaps signaling a very new era in the history of American jurisprudence, especially around issues of habeas corpus. So we are delighted to have here Michael Ratner, the President of the Center for Constitutional Rights, who will be giving at 7 o'clock this evening, as many of you know, the keynote address for the symposium. And I believe we'll be speaking tomorrow morning, some very early hour, 8 o'clock downtown on similar issues. He's joined for this discussion by two important figures from the arts community, Janet Echelman, a public artist, who we'll be hearing more about her work, and Julian Bonder, who is also known to many of you here for his work in public art and architectural work as well around problems of memory. So we thought this would be an interesting pairing. All of you come from these issues different directions. I'm going to pass around a little handout, which is a map of the U.S. naval base in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, and the various prisons, although, of course, these keep on shifting. I think we'll ask Michael to start a little bit with where things are, as it were. And then we're going to talk about this whole question. If indeed the camps are closed, what is to happen to those sites? What would be appropriate monumental or museum responses? What are the sorts of things that artists might do, both obviously very difficult to do in the context of a military base, but perhaps elsewhere? What does this call forth to remember this extraordinary and deeply disturbing period in recent American history in which the commitment to the rule of law, in which torture, extraordinary rendition, and all sorts of forms of detention have been practiced, often in situations of extraordinary darkness and transparency, although in other ways they've been open secrets for the whole world to know. Conversation might go as far as Abu Ghraib or other sites that are still not even marked. So with that, maybe Michael, if you would care to just say a couple words about where we are at this juncture in history, and then enter into the conversation about art and architecture.
Very few brief comments. The map you're looking at, of course, when I once went to a lecture of a friend of mine on Guantanamo, she began with saying this was really the result of the first period of outward U.S. imperialism, which is how we got Guantanamo during the Spanish-American War, and we decided to stay and take the 45 square mile military base, roughly the size of Manhattan. So it's not by chance that we're sitting here talking about Guantanamo today, and it's not by chance that it was set up as what another friend of mine called an anomalous zone, which means a zone where it's not clear what law applies or whether any law applies. And as I'll talk about tonight, the first case I actually had there was the Haitian refugee cases from 90 to 93, when first under Bush 1 and then under Clinton, it was said that no law applied at Guantanamo and they could do whatever they wanted to the refugees. So that early act of taking this base is really characterized not only that period, but of course the current period where it was again the Bush administration and the memos underlying the putting of prisoners at Guantanamo that clearly said we want to put these people at Guantanamo because we believe it's a law-free zone. And our position very quickly was there's no such place in the world where there's a law-free zone and there's no people that don't have legal rights. And that was the position when we began. That's still the position we have today. And finally, after 3 Supreme Court victories, more or less have vindicated that underlying proposition that the Constitution does have some application to Guantanamo. They've already been held earlier in many other cases to apply to Puerto Rico and other territories. So that was the key underlying Guantanamo. And of course, the other key is that when you have secret sites, when you have sites where you can't have lawyers in, when you have sites where people are held incommunicado, what you then get is torture. That's the reason for secret sites. That's why they're there. That's what we got at Guantanamo. On art and architecture, I mean, I guess the one thing I can say, which I read Mark's article about the opening flags in front of Guantanamo, and there's a picture I have, which we got a chance, I'll show it tonight, of a soldier reaching up and replacing George Bush's picture with Obama's picture at the front of the military base. And it has it's interesting symbolism in a number of ways. One is because, of course, as we'll talk about, Guantanamo's promise, Obama's promise to close Guantanamo within a year, but also it means that all of the captions of our lawsuits, which are, for example, a name of a Guantanamo detainee versus Bush, are now being changed to the name of that Guantanamo detainee versus Obama. So that at the same time that there's a promise, there's also a responsibility of what's occurring there right now. And what's occurring there right now is still by no means perfect. There's people on hunger strikes, there's people being force-fed, and there's people still being kept in fairly bad conditions, although I'm relatively confident that a lot of that is going to change. It took us, and I'll end on this, it took us till we won the first Supreme Court case in June 2004, which is, we represented the first people who were sent there in January 2001. The first person went to Guantanamo, first group. We got to the Supreme Court final victory in the first part of the phase, June 2004. August 2004, a lawyer from my office, who's really one of the stars of all this, made the first trip to Guantanamo, a woman named Gita Gutierrez, and has been there probably 30 or 40 times. This time, it's interesting, and I went to Guantanamo a lot during the first period, the Haitian period, and I have not gone on this period for two reasons. One is I was emotionally devastated by my first trips there, and I don't know if I could ever go back. And the second reason had to do with, a variety of other issues having to do with having to go through a very heavy security clearance process that I could probably get through, but I didn't want to have to ask all my friends about the last time I smoked marijuana. Anyway, so I'll end on that. I don't know when we're going to end. When it's going to close in a year. The question is what's going to happen to the people. We'll talk about that.